I will introduce our first speaker, which will be Mr. Mike Johnson, who serves as our congressman for the last 4 terms. We have the wonderful honor of having him online together here for us, the Congressional District of Louisiana. He serves as vice chairman of the House Republican Conference. He's a leader on the Judiciary and Armed Services Committees. He is also the chairman of the Republican Study Committee, and is considered to be the intellectual arsenal of the conservatives in Congress. Mr. Johnson is a dedicated husband, father of 4. He's also a constitutional law attorney who's devoted his life and career to defending our fundamental freedoms, traditional values in courts and in the court of public opinion. We'll be able to welcome Mr. Congressman Mike Johnson. Thank you very much.
Well, greetings everyone, and thank you so much for allowing me to participate in this celebration of our Independence Day. I am delighted to participate in Republicans Overseas and the Worldwide Freedom Initiative as the International Summit is launched and set for this November. What an important time for this. What a critical time for all of these efforts and for the commitment that you all have to defend and preserve our fundamental freedoms and our essential cultural, historical, and religious heritage that all together really allows all people to be lifted up and allows the conditions for human flourishing. We all recognize that we are in unprecedented battles right now, not only for our constitutional rights, but for the very survival of Western civilization. There's no way to sugarcoat this. The challenges could not be any greater than they are, and the stakes, as we all know, could not be any higher. In the Congress, the members of the House Republican Conference are fighting every day to push back against the radical left and its new invention, the woke agenda that has just taken hold. It aims to capture and tear down all of our institutions. And they've been pretty successful at that thus far. And they're aiming to dismantle the very foundations that made us the freest and most powerful and most successful nation in the history of the world. We all know how poisonous, how toxic this woke agenda is. It is terribly divisive. It is designed to separate and categorize people into categories of oppressors and the oppressed. It has infiltrated nearly every aspect of society, from our education system to now even the U.S. military, and it attacks truth in the name of inclusion. It's been a real poison in our society and in our culture. But I want to tell you and remind you all that there are some hopeful signs. We're optimists, by the way, as conservatives. We always are. We look towards the future with great anticipation, and we believe that our best days are still ahead of us. Just in the past week, the conservative U.S. Supreme Court has given us some more hopeful signs. They've issued a number of landmark decisions that will help us uphold religious freedom and the right of conscience, and even move beyond this insidious race-based criteria for college admissions, as well as Biden's unconstitutional student loan forgiveness wealth transfer scheme. These are just a few of the key battles, and we all know that each of them must be won. But to win the overall war for the future of the West, it's going to take all of us working together, collaborating and sharing our experiences across borders and advancing our principles and our policies, not just on Capitol Hill, not just in boardrooms around the country and around the world, but also in media and other outlets in the international arena. None of us is in this alone, and we are either going to stand together now or risk losing it all. We're in what my friend Dr. Os Guinness likes to refer to as a civilizational moment. He says in the history of all great nations, there comes a time where the foundations of that nation are being undermined, they're being challenged. And that society, that culture, that nation has to decide whether to restore and defend and preserve those foundations or replace them with something else. We're perilously close to that moment. Today we celebrate our 247th birthday as a nation. And you know, if you're in high school or college, if you're a young person, that sounds like a long time, but all of us know it really isn't. On the wide span of human history, 250 years, 2.5 centuries is almost nothing. And we're still an experiment in self-governance. We're still a great experience, an experiment in a constitutional republic. And the founders of this republic, this greatest nation that has ever been, knew that what they were doing was not necessarily guaranteed to last. And so they gave us their admonitions on how to preserve it, how to keep the republic. And that's what all of us are engaged in right now, with all hands on the plow, trying to defend and preserve what we have been given, this extraordinary blessing, this experiment in liberty. 247 years. You know, I speak often to young people, college groups and high school students, and I'm often begin these lectures, these presentations, and I ask them if they know why America really is unique and extraordinary amongst all others. And I get lots of empty looks on their faces. And oftentimes I'll have a whiteboard or a large chalkboard behind me, and I'll take a marker or a piece of chalk, and I'll go to that board and I'll say, I'm going to show you in just 5 words here what is unique and distinct and different specifically about your country and why it is the freest, most powerful, most successful in all of human history. And I go up to the board and I write in large letters at the top, G-O-D. Then I write, go about halfway down the board and I write king with a lowercase k. And at the bottom of the board, I write the people / the subjects. I draw arrows down from the king to the people, the subjects. And I step back from the board and I look up and point to it and I say, now students, what you're seeing here is a word picture, a graphic depiction of what is referred to as the philosophy of the divine right of kings. Is that most nations in history, the ones that you know and have studied, believed primarily in something like this, that there was a deity perhaps, but the boss is the earthly sovereign, the king. The king is the one that can tell the people what they can do for a living, what property they can hold, where they can live, sometimes who they can marry, how many children they can have. The king was the boss. What's unique and different about our country is that we did something radically different. G.K. Chesterton, the famous British philosopher, said one time, America is the only nation in the world that is founded upon a creed. And he said that creed is listed with theological lucidity in the Declaration of Independence, our nation's birth certificate. We celebrate on July 4th. And what did it say? The founders got together and they looked at this design and they said, you know what? The earthly king is not our boss. Our rights don't derive from a king or a state. Our rights derive from, frankly, the King of Kings. We understand it's a self-evident truth. It's obvious to us that our rights come from God, our Creator, and not from another man here on this planet. And so what I tell the students is, we did something radically different. In the Declaration, Jefferson wrote those words that we all know by heart. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among those the rights to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So I take the eraser, I go back to the board for my illustration, and I erase the king. I erase the middleman and all the arrows that came from the king to the people, and I erase the word the subjects, and all that remains on the board is God, the Creator, and I draw all the arrows go down now just to the people themselves, and I say, ha-ha, this is us. This is what is different. This is what made us remarkable. We're the first nation in the history of the world to base ourselves upon this premise. We took the middleman out. We created this experiment in self-governance. As Lincoln articulated many decades later in the Gettysburg Address, that we're dedicated to this proposition, that we are one nation under God, and that a government of the people, by the people, and for the people should not perish from the earth. This is what made us extraordinary and distinct. But what I tell the kids and the college students as they're watching this and nodding their heads and understanding what made us different, as I said, well, the problem is now that idea, that philosophy, that foundational truth led us to become this great nation. And for a century and a half or more, that was the prevailing sentiment. But then something began to change. And what we tolerated in moderation, our children excuse in excess. And I say to the young people all the time, what's happened now, the reason that you are not feeling and probably will not be able to enjoy the same liberty, opportunity, and security as your parents and grandparents had, is because something else has now been erased from the board. And I take the eraser and I go back up to the whiteboard or the chalkboard and I erase the letters G-O-D and all the arrows that come down from God to the people. And now the only thing that remains on their board for illustration is the people themselves. I said, this, my friends, is what's happened over the last couple of generations, is we have erased our recognition, the founders' self-evident truth that they proclaimed, boldly proclaimed that our rights come from our Creator. Now we have a rising number of people who do not even recognize the existence of the Creator at all. And there are huge implications from that, I tell the students, because the founders understood and believed vigorously in individual rights. Why? Because they understood that meant we're made in God's image. All of us are made in God's image. And because of that, every single person has inestimable dignity and value. And your value is not related in any way, by the way, to the color of your skin or what zip code you live in or where you went to high school or what your talents are, tell the students. Your value is inherent because it is given to you by the one who made you. But if there is no God, and if we accept the premise of the left that there is no absolute truth either, then you have no intrinsic individual value. In fact, I go to the board and I circle the people, I say, you are just a social animal. And my friends, if you think that's a happy circumstance by which to organize your society and your government and your culture, you're quite wrong, because this is the basis of Marxism, communism, socialism, the idea that you're just another social animal. And you know what happens to the social animals? They must be directed, they must be controlled, and they must surrender their freedom to the all-powerful state. That leads you right back into tyranny, and that, I tell the young people, is the peril of today, that we are facing that as a new reality, and that the foundations and the foundational truths are worthy of defense, and it falls to us to be the stewards of those great truths. I'm finishing my first book right now, and it's called The 7 Core Principles of American Conservatism. It's birthed out of necessity because, as you and I recognize, there are a lot of people in our party and a lot of self-identified conservatives in the U.S. and around the world who are not quite able to give a good defense for that. They can't articulate what it means exactly to be a conservative anymore. And to me, I think it boils down to 7 core principles. It's individual freedom, limited government, the rule of law, peace through strength, fiscal responsibility, free markets, and human dignity. And under each of those are subcategories. For example, under human dignity is the belief in the sanctity of every human life. But those are the principles that animated our party and our countrymen, and at its essence, our founding fathers from the very beginning. They believed that a strong and prosperous America would be good not only for Americans, but for all people around the world. And certainly since World War II, that has been the case. We are the great superpower, the great world power. And just the perception of a strong America in so many places, at so many times, is what has kept terrorists and tyrants at bay. Right now, my friends, we all know that we are projecting weakness on the world stage, not strength. We are advancing policies and ideas from the left in this country and the Democrat Party in charge that are anathema to the founding principles of our country. All those core principles that I just articulated, they believe in the opposite of them. And they are trying to tear down and dismantle those foundations that made us the great nation that we are. Psalm 11:3 in Scripture asks, if the foundations be destroyed, what will the righteous do? That is not a rhetorical question anymore. It's one that you and I have to answer. And I think we have to speak with clarity and conviction like never before. And we have to lock arms and we have to engage in this battle together. It's a fateful one. The fate of our nation, and thus really, in some sense, the entire globe, depends upon our success in this great endeavor. A strong and prosperous America. That's what we're fighting for. The preservation of our fundamental God-given liberties. That's what we're fighting for. And I applaud you all for being involved and taking the time to contribute to this great cause. We wish you all a happy and healthy 4th of July. We look forward to the big event in November, and we wish you peace and prosperity for our nation and for all of us in the days ahead. May God bless you. Thank you again for allowing me to participate, and I hope you all have a great time together.
Quel mot de sagesse. Voilà, je remercie notre cher congressman Mike Johnson pour son intervention.